So we're about, they reckon, 2 to 3 weeks until we reach the peak of the coronavirus outbreak in this country at the moment. And things are moving on apace related to the science of COVID-19. So this video is really looking at the ways that we can test to see, firstly, whether someone has COVID-19, but also whether someone has already had it and not realize that they had it, so that they are now more immune.
Okay, so this is a quote from Bruce Aylward, Assistant Director of the World Health Organization, and it says, "Effective quarantine is essential for tackling the coronavirus, and this cannot happen without extensive testing for COVID-19. So we're at the stage now where we are we're isolating, we're self-isolating ourselves if we're at risk, and also we're social distancing. The next phase is testing. So one country that has done a lot of testing is South Korea. They've done mass testing and they've tried to really quickly identify and isolate those with the disease. It's also vital to calculate accurate infection and survival rates, and this data is really critical for getting public safety measures right. So this is the most recent data I could find on testing, and you can see South Korea are up there at the top. And their population is lower than the UK, and they've done the most testing. Then Germany, Russia, Australia, United States, although United States there are a hell of a lot of people who live in that country, so it's quite a low number of tests. And here in the UK, the government have realised that testing is a really important way forward, and they're spending a lot of money in research, and the scientists are doing a lot of development of a different quick test that people can use. So there are two main ways you can do a COVID-19 test. But before we talk about that, how do you do a sample? The most common tests are what we call upper respiratory tract samples, so that means a nose and throat swab. They also might take some of your sputum, which means some of your spit as well, in a container. So you can see the person up above here, and if they're going to test you, they're going to be wearing this type of protective gear to protect themselves from infection. Each sample is going to be identified with the ID, the date of birth, the type of sample, and then it's going to be sent off to the laboratory. So as said earlier, there are two main ways of identifying whether you have or had COVID-19. The first one is rt-pcr, which means reverse transcription polymerase chain reaction. Now, if you're an A-level biology student, then you will definitely know what PCR is, and you'll definitely understand about reverse transcription. However, for the purpose of this video, I'm not going to go into great detail, apart from just to tell you that you can place the samples. Well, once you've treated the samples, you then place it in a machine called a thermal cycler, and then it will try to identify whether the RNA is present. So some positives about PCR are that they're highly accurate, but the problem is it takes quite a while to turn around the samples. So you've got to get the sample to the laboratory, then it's got to be tested, so it takes about 4 hours, but then there's time waiting in the testing lab, and actually the turnaround for getting results can take 2 to 4 days, which, if you don't know whether you have COVID-19, is not a really good thing, because your symptoms could be getting worse. And the other thing to think about is that you may be spreading the virus to many others without realizing it. The second type of test is called the antibody test, and it's quite new for COVID-19, and scientists have rushed this through. And the great thing about this is that it is a home test. So this test can detect if a person has had the coronavirus before and has since recovered. So that's very useful, particularly if you are a key worker, for example, working in the NHS. So staff who want to know if they've been infected and whether they've recovered, so that they can then return to work. So how does this test kit work? So firstly, what they do is they collect a blood sample. So luckily this is just a finger prick test. Now the great thing is you don't have to send that sample off to a laboratory, and what you do is you add the blood sample to what we call a sample well on a plastic device. You then add a couple of drops of buffer in the sample well. A buffer is to keep the pH at a stable rate. And this is the best bit. Within 15 minutes you can read the results and it will tell you whether you've been exposed to COVID-19 or not. So how is it doing that? Well, let's look at some basic science first of all. So here I've got a white blood cell. Now white blood cells, they can produce antibodies. So there's the white blood cell, and it can produce an antibody. Now an antibody is something that can attach to what we call antigens on the pathogen, so in this case COVID-19, okay, and it attaches to it and it destroys that virus. So lots of the same type of antibodies are going to be produced in your blood. So after infection with COVID-19, you'll have a range of antibodies there that can tell the test can tell whether you've had it or not. So the most common antibodies after infection are called IgM and IgG. So IgM is when you have first come across COVID-19, and it's the first antibody to be made by the body, and IgG is found as time goes by. So IgG, after a while, those antibodies increase. So now these results should be clearer in terms of looking at the results. So you've got 3 detection lines, and the first one is C, what we call a control line. G means basically, M means that you've been exposed to you've produced the IgM antibodies, and then IgG antibody is the G line, and then all 3. So pretty much if you get all 3 lines, then that's saying yes, you've had COVID-19, and yes, your body has produced both types of antibodies. So you're likely to be immune in the future, but also it shows that definitely you've had it and you have now recovered. So I hope that's explained to you the different testing methodologies and also the fantastic innovation that is occurring. There's a rapid increase in technology, and we are boosting our capacity to detect the microbes and viruses using laboratory methods. So hopefully in the future a vaccine is on its way. Right, so I hope you've enjoyed that. I'll speak to you soon, and I'm sure there'll be another update shortly.